Hi, Martine.
Florida, Rachel.
Horror indeed. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much for your time making the space for it. We've worked closely together now for a long time. We met via DARPL and the senior leader program from DARPL that I facilitated the conversation of. And then something a little bit magical started to happen and form, and an action research started with you in the Vale and your wonderful school leaders in the Vale a few years back now, and so we've worked closely together ever since. And I just wanted this time to talk about that program and also the benefits, transformational moments, but it might be that we talk about the challenges too, right? Because when we're talking about race and racism and anti-racism, it's not easy, and you and I, professionally and personally, know that. So yeah, this space, this conversation is centered on if they only knew, like if the sector only knew the benefits, only knew the challenges, and only knew the way forwards that this program has supported the development of with you and the teams in the Vale. So, yeah, it'd be good just to talk us through your why from the perspective of the Vale and that initial program in particular, and why you wanted to get involved in this.
Okay. Um, Initial. So yes, I went online trying to do some investigative finding out what professional learning was most appropriate for my schools in the Vale with their very interesting demographics from having a diverse school population in the west to the not so diverse in the east.
Yeah.
So I went on a mission to find professional learning because our schools recognised pre and post George Floyd they needed to do something deeper and more impactful. So I asked you very nicely, what should we do? How can you help me in my schools? And then the intention of action research came about. And when you suggested it, I was scared. I
Mm.
was thinking, how am I going to facilitate such a long commitment for schools? Because long, as in, I knew that over an academic year, that's hard for schools
Yeah.
and it's hard for school leaders. But the idea when we came up with or when you came up with it, and I said, okay, let's make this happen, was to make sure the intention was that it was for school leaders, so people with agency to make change. And again, if you make sure the leaders are culturally competent, which was my ambition, then I thought magic could happen. So what
Yeah.
was my intention? What did I want? I wanted my schools to be culturally competent in the words of Rosemary Campbell Stevens. And I was scared because I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if it
Yeah.
would scare them, if they would close up, or if they would just flourish. So the intention was culturally competent leaders, but I was scared.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, thank you. I think that's really important to recognize, isn't it? The the length of time, like the design of this has been incredibly deliberate. When myself and Hind came up with the structure of the
Mm.
action research program, yeah, you know, we just put ourselves away from this professional learning for leaders mode and into learning and teaching. And what we know is that learning sticks when it's done little and often over time in a circular motion about anything. We know about sticky knowledge. We're not going to go into the pedagogy of learning, but sometimes in the learning of educators and professionals, but we don't think in the same ways. And I think that that pattern and that approach has been incredibly significant. But you're right, the fear came from the how are they going to receive this, but also how are they going to make time? for this over the whole academic year because it is a huge commitment. And I don't know if you remember, but the first cohort, one of the deputies at the time, I think they're a head teacher now, one of the deputies at the time said, "Oh my gosh, after each of these days, I think I need a bit of a lie down because the exploration and the wrestling of all the difficulty was deep."
It was emotional, and
Yeah,
I think I underestimated the emotional space that those humans would need.
yeah,
But that emotional space meant that little and often learning, it stuck, it was embedded, and
yeah,
we are in cohort 5,
yeah,
and they still say it's the best professional learning, most impactful that they've had. And some of our alumni have gone on to fantastic things, but they are very proud of the learning and the style of learning and the legacy. I know we'll talk more about, I mean, the impact, but I
yeah,
think having the emotional space meant that the learning was deeper than a afternoon twilight to solve
yeah,
the world of racism in 45 minutes on a
absolutely.
Wednesday evening when everybody's tired.
Okay, we've done that. We can move on now. It's madness. When you say it out loud like that, I think I'm laughing because it is ridiculous. Like it's such a ridiculous mindset. But because of the pulls on time and because we're socialized as leaders to think of things in small boxes and we don't mix up the boxes or remove the lines so there are no boxes, it's very easy to say, right, have we got this one time of professional learning to talk about this gulf of stuff and issues called racism? It's just a bit ludicrous. So that time, that model, and that approach, and I think that the style of those conversations made the leaders feel safe to be brave and to connect emotionally. Because George Floyd's murder happened in 2020, we know that, and I think school leaders were faced with lots of challenging questions. You know, myself, I was a school leader at the time, on maternity leave, close within that time, then went back into school after maternity leave. But it there are the pulls on budgets, and there is the pull on the number of hours within the working day and within the working week, and you want to support families, and then before you know it, this big social issue doesn't really get addressed. But I know leaders were asking you, look, we need some support because how do we have these conversations with governors? Governors are wanting us to do something, and we don't know what the something should be and should look like. Um, do you want to share a little bit about some of those conversations that were had at the time, or some of the feeling at that time that school leaders had and shared with you?
I think,
Because Wales has an anti-racist Wales action plan, right? So
yes. And what I'll be very explicit in my local authority, these conversations were happening pre the action plan.
yes,
And so when the action plan was shared by Welsh Government, we're like, thank you very much. That gives us more agency. And
yes,
corporately, there was a priority to be more actively inclusive in this space. So for me, the national picture aligned.
yes,
The Welsh political landscape was let's talk about racism, let's be actively anti-racist. So it meant that when we were having these discussions corporately across the council and with school leaders, they were ready. So
yeah,
for me, the environment was set up. So
yeah,
there was backing nationally and locally. So school leaders were okay. We'll try this, and it did start with a pilot with a handful, and I'm thinking a hand and a half full of schools, and it was new. So I would say the first cohort were very brave, and
yeah,
those head teachers were very brave to trust both of us and Hind to do something so new and groundbreaking in Wales, because this was the first time this type of learning had happened in Wales. But then, in terms of reflect on the conversations with cohort 2, cohort 3, and 4, and now 5, and now when I go into schools and I think, what was the impact and what the conversation? So, the impact for one of the schools was going into their hall and looking not just a little display on a notice board, an actual art installation tracking the journeys of families in the Windrush era in Wales. So you had Cynefin curriculum for Wales, not just on a little A4 piece of paper.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
had
yeah,
it on, I'd say, don't know my age, but I'd say definitely 12 foot by 6 foot,
yeah,
actual deep learning. And the head teacher said, this is the legacy of this learning, a change in curriculum, a change in policy, and a change of culture. So there was the visual touching, and then it's because the schools have made sure that inclusion and anti-racism is in their school improvement plans. It's not something you do the course and you think, thank you, I've done it. It gets woven into their strategic quality plans and their improvement planning because they've said that's where it makes a difference.
yeah,
So watching that learning, that school improvement learning evolve, and in terms of quality assuring, if that learning is actually genuine,
yeah,
schools have been kind enough to allow me to quality assure what's been going on with their various pupil voice groups.
yeah,
And listening to the children talk about the work their schools are doing. And what is really special is I'd say nearly all of those pupil groups think it's their idea. And when I explained that their teachers went on some training, they said, no, 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 no. We decided that our curriculum didn't have enough black and brown people and people look like me. So this
yeah,
is what our books look like. This is what our walls look like. This is what we learn about. And then when I say to the head teachers, you do know that you are taking no glory for this. The children feel that they've driven, that your anti-racist policy and how you record incidents, it's all about them. You're
yeah,
just minor spectators in this
yeah,
process. And they've said that's when they know it's embedded, when the
yeah,
children feel that they are driving. So in primary schools, secondary schools, in diverse schools, in very white schools, the children feel it's them. They are the drivers of their school being actively anti-racist. So for
yeah,
me, those conversations and then having conversations with parents, I'm thinking, okay, and the parents being facilitated on their anti-racist journey so they
yeah,
can be active allies in the playground. So there's FOMO. And then it turns out that governors are also more culturally curious and finding different ways to develop their cultural competency.
yeah,
So in terms of, yes, the head teachers have had learning, that learning has been disseminated through school culture, school improvement plans. But when you
yeah,
talk to children and parents and governors, and especially when it's quite an organic conversation, that's when I feel, yeah, our schools have really made sure that this is part of their school culture and not something that's done on a monthly basis, once a month,
yeah.
once a year for one special day. This is who we are.
Yeah, and I think that ownership is so important, isn't it? You know, you've got different stakeholders thinking that it's their idea or wanting to know more, and taking that responsibility because yeah, there's been a complete uptick in hateful anti-Semitic attacks, um, rates of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate are going through the roof. We know that there's systemic injustice still, still around. And these ecosystems that are equitable are so very important right now because the context of right now means that if we don't get it right in schools, and it doesn't mean that we get everything right all of the time and that school leaders are perfect or what, no, because we're all human. So that's not the case. But if we don't make an extra and added concerted effort right now, then how are we going to restitch the fabric of society to be accepting of everybody and to show love and kindness if we don't talk about it in schools, if we don't think about and consider our curriculum deeply and notice the absence as much as the presence. So, I'm honestly so grateful and just just touched by the schools in the Vale because I know their commitment was never about a one-off anything. And I also know that their commitment to this space has not been, okay, well, it's done now. moving on, it's sustained years and years later, and the ripple effect of all of that is incredible. Like the amount of hope that that provides all young people is fantastic. And I think about what my grandmother did in her school and the creation of the equitable ecosystem of learning and the style of leadership that my mum had and the style of leadership that I had. And it's we've got to find ways to support others to have the confidence and the courage to go there, you know, which I think this is supported with. Um, are there any or what highlights have really struck you? You've got to take your mind back for a few years across the cohorts. So not just the current ones, but previous ones too. Yeah. Any highlight standout moments for you?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Without sounding too much like a fridge magnet, I love the fact that my schools that have done the action research or who have been partnered with schools who've done it, you can feel the culture of kindness when you go into reception, and you feel that culture of kindness when you walk down the corridors, in the
Mm.
classrooms. So before I do the stand-up moment, that change of feeling
Yeah.
and is there, is real. Um, Standout moment, my goodness, I'm thinking of one of the children in year 5 telling me about the hidden figures and explaining, as you know, year four. And I remember when this particular family joined the school from Nigeria who weren't very confident, and language acquisition needed a lot of support to develop. So listening to her talk very articulately about the importance of why her school and other schools need to have more people that look like her in their day-to-day learning. So it was a small thing,
Mm.
and because this little girl was so forceful, I would say forceful, because she said, Martin, you need to go and go to other schools and show them my book, show them my work, and show them this is the things they can do, because it's not just about science, it's about literacy, it's about learning. So she asked me to take photocopies of her book and take it with me to different schools. And she said, and just to make sure you do it, can you set up a meeting so that I meet the other schools to make sure that you've done it? And I thought, she's year 4, she's year
Holding you
four,
to account,
and
should
she's
be in
holding me
charge
to
of
account.
government.
And I love that confidence in, yes, this is what happens in my school, but what about other children in other
Yeah,
schools? And she says, they don't have to be black and look like me, but
yeah,
she said, these women were computers, and without them, people wouldn't have gone into space, and we all need to learn about it. And when I did do a Teams meeting with her and another school, um, she was so proud when the other child who was in the meeting held up her work, and the other child in the other school, the other side of the veil, said, "Your work is really good. I like what you did with this sentence."
oh,
So my standout moment isn't so much a moment; it's a feeling, and a
yeah,
feeling of pride that when I asked both head teachers, "How do you feel about sharing your work?" They were like, "Oh, but isn't everybody doing it?" And I was like, "No, no." And the other, oh, okay, I only said one moment, I'm going to plural. I'm thinking of one of our schools in not the most diverse area when they had a spotlight from Estin. And I thought I was going to burst with pride because, again, this school have done significant work in moving their culture, policy, and all other. Sorry, I have a Teams I need to get rid of. Um, the culture curriculum, and the fact that Estin recognised it in a
mm,
spotlight. And then another school down the road, they had Estin a couple of weeks later, and they wanted it as their spotlight. And it's in their report, but it's not a spotlight because it felt like there was many schools in the Vale that were being inspected that were very much a case of come and see how strong we are in this area in our school improvement planning. And Eston said, we know, we saw it a couple of weeks ago. And so in terms of not moments, it's that ripple. And even though this isn't done for external validation, the pride I have when
yeah,
people outside the veil come in and say, oh my goodness, this is not the most diverse area, but your curriculum is actively anti-racist and your
Mm.
policies are actively anti-racist, and
Yeah.
it is being monitored with your school improvement planning processes. And that
Yeah.
is when I think, oh, that's a lovely thing. And I know you
Yeah.
said moment, and I'm still doing plural. And I think of a secondary school who have something called Cultures Week. And what happens in that week, and I think they're in year 4 of this, doing this, that not only are the parents and the children part of showcasing culture, whether it's Welsh culture, Iranian culture, whether or not it's culture from the Caribbean or it's culture from North Africa, but the parents are part of showcasing culture. In a secondary school, that's quite hard, teenagers and parents in one room. So that's what looks like it on the surface, but in the background, those young people are having conversations with
Mm.
their senior leadership about the curriculum offer and making sure this week we are quality assuring. So taking just a snapshot of what it looks like. And again, pupils holding teachers to account to say your policy says you're anti-racist, but show me. And the fact that on the Friday, all of the celebration of learning and the showcasing of the arts and the culture is done in a very explicit, purposeful way. So again,
Mm.
not moment, but the fact that a school that was really struggling with this area, this is what it looks like 4 or 5 years on. So I know
Mm.
you asked for moments, but we have a few, and I'm doing very well to think that's what I'm going to stay with. That I'm going to leave Cultures Week as my glimmer, as my glimmer
Yeah.
of hope, especially with everything that's going on now. That children from different faiths, different backgrounds, their children, their friends, they want to hang out, they like the same music, and they really care that the world is a better place because of the learning
Mhm.
they're doing in school.
Mm. Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things that I was thinking of you were talking there. The first is the fact that you have school leaders who are encouraging and asking Estin to look at this area. When actually, if we're thinking about anti-racism and we're thinking about the fear often, very, very often surrounds that space, the fact that you've now got school leaders saying to a body that is holding schools to account and, checking and this, that, and the other, and saying, come and have a look over here. That's incredible. It demonstrates that there is a lot of courage, that fear has been shed, and it doesn't mean that it's gone away completely for every single thing that might well come up, but there has been a development of courage and a lot of hard work that's gone in. And so, yes, Cultures Week is something that one of the schools has done for a few years now, but there's a lot of other work that goes on around policy, around procedure, around staff professional learning and knowledge. Sometimes my worry about this space, not with the schools that in the Vale, but more generally with schools up and down the country, is that they think, oh great, yep, it's this time of the year, we do this, tick, move on. I think that the joyous thing about the Vale and the commitment that the leaders have shown is that it's that plus that plus that plus that plus that plus that. It's not just that surface level tick box stuff that's going on, which is great. That's what we want. We want the deep work. We don't want the quick
Don't want,
fixes because they're never
don't want,
fixes.
no, don't want quick fixes. And listening to what you just said about the leaders, one of the moments has been the idea, the deep belief went from an idea to maybe to a deep belief that racist incidents sit front and centre in safeguarding.
Mhm.
When we were having those conversations in the professional learning sessions and they were reading about identification and case
Mhm.
studies, I loved it when they were like, well, of course it's safeguarding. Of course it is.
Mhm.
And to see that expand, and again, policies have changed in the Vale
Yeah.
to reflect that. But what is great, it's of course. So that's what I mean. When we started these conversations, these professional learning sessions, when we talked about race incidents in the safeguarding space, there
Yeah.
was and then it was of course, and now it feels like with the head teachers, well, it wouldn't be anything else.
Yeah. And
And
that's
that,
what that's what
yeah,
time does, doesn't it? You know, like it gives that space to breathe and it gives that space to start to embed. And now it's firmly there. And all of this is about future proofing, irrespective of whoever is in post. We want to build learning spaces that are equitable for everybody, that are reflective of everybody, that are celebratory of everybody, but that teachers and everybody that works in schools um don't feel embarrassed or don't feel as nervous or don't run away from. Like we
mm,
want to have that confidence and courage to talk about this because it's affecting everybody, you know. Um, this is going to be a bit hard, but I want you to, if you can, think of one or two leaders that have been on this program that have had a transformational moment.
mm. Okay.
And what would that
When
moment be?
that transformational moment was in one of our schools, and when they realised that the only time their pupils saw characters in their books of colour was in year 10, 11 of Mice of Men. And they
Ah,
thought that their curriculum diet was diverse. And when children said, the reason why we actually are tolerant of Mice of Men, it's the only time we've seen somebody
mm,
that's black. And the moment was that aha, that a child would rather have a negative representation than no representation. So that school leader was aha, and that school leader is a confident, competent, kind human.
yeah.
And that moment, and watching her face, her body language at that moment, and said, "We've got some work to do. If if our children feel that awful representation is better than no representation, then A, of Mice of Men should not be taught in our school, but B, we need to make sure that our representation changes, which means our curriculum changes, which means our school culture has to have some deep change." So that was a aha moment, and I was, yeah, that was scary. So that was one of my aha moments
Hmm.
because it's the school that that are a kind and compassionate school. So when that moment happened, that was one of the aha
Hmm.
moments, but
Yeah.
not in a good way, but makes me have a shiver.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the other aha moments, it wasn't, the school leader wasn't in the room, but I fed back because their pupil group were holding the council's senior leaders to account on what the school, what the council were doing in terms of anti-racism, like how many social workers were from the global majority and how do they track and how do they retain, all of those conversations. And they said, because you do realise in our school, and it should be in the council, if anybody is racist or discriminatory, it's one of the worst things you can do in our school. And the reason why it was the aha moment, they said that is when our head teacher gets the most cross and you can hear him down the corridor. So I'm sure that head teacher will, and he did cringe, but I said, but the fact is, as a school culture, the pupils know that is unacceptable. It's not who they are as a school community. And them telling the director of social services, director of finance, saying that should be the same in your organisation. When things that are unkind happen, the people in your organisation should know it's unacceptable. So that was an aha moment for a child, but it was an aha moment for lots of leaders in that room to go, oh, do our employees know that this behaviour is unacceptable? And watching their faces go, aha.
Yeah. 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 No, I think thank you. That's really, really, really powerful. Okay. Right. This is the last question now. All right, before we wrap up. Um, legacy, impact. What is it?
Okay. That I would say the 40 schools that have taken part in this action research, and there are only 53 schools in the Vale, they are culturally competent organisations. That's one of the impacts. And the fact that all of those schools, even the ones that haven't done the research, they notice the trends of are our children from the global majority, what is their attendance, what is their attainment, is their progress in line where it should be? So they're looking at their school community with a different set of glasses.
Mhm.
And so in terms of legacy, I feel that children from the global majority in the Vale are more likely to have their ambitions fulfilled than they were before this piece of work started.
Well, that's a bit powerful, isn't it? What a way to finish. Um, Thank you, Martine. It's been such a joy reflecting on the effectiveness of the program, how you found it, how leaders have found it, the journey of the program. And we will catch up again soon. So yeah, thank you. Diolch yn
Oh,
fawr.
oh, I'm going to say Jochen to you, Rachel, and thank you for helping me and my schools literally stand on the shoulders of giants. Because when I first came to Wales all those years ago and I heard of the work your grandma was doing, I never thought that that type of work would even touch the Vale. I thought it was a very far off dream.
Oh,
And look where we are now. So thank you. Thank you to your mum and thank you to your grandma for making sure that we in the Vale can actually stand on the shoulders of giants and create a future that I didn't think we could have in Wales. So yeah, no, thank you. Be proud.
don't make me cry now. Thank you. All right. Take care.
Well, Val.